Hello and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sergiu Panainte. I am Deputy Director at the Black Sea Trust for Regional Cooperation, the German Marshall Fund Bucharest office. And it is my pleasure to welcome you at the webinar, which is dedicated to the outcome of the Moldovan elections, called After the Ballot, Assessing Moldova's 2025 Parliamentary Elections. We have a truly stellar lineup of speakers, and I'm really happy to introduce you to them. We have Alina Doroftei, who is a GMF ReThink.CEE Fellow, and I'll tell you in a few seconds about the program. We have Manole, Executive Director of Promo-LEX, one of the oldest elections observing organizations in Moldova. We have Polina Panainte, Secretary of the Civic Coalition for Free and Fair Elections, and also Director at the Association for Participatory Democracy, ADEPT. And last but not least, we have Laurențiu, Pleșca, Program Coordinator, Black Sea Trust GMF Office in Bucharest. This webinar is organized within the framework of the GMF ReThink.CEE program that I was telling you about, and the program is about introducing findings from the Central and Eastern Europe countries about democracy, about elections, about all the democratic challenges that we are facing in these difficult times. Also, as a support for our webinar, I'd like to introduce the Promote Accountability in Electoral Processes in Eastern Partnership Countries, or the acronym Pro-Elect project, that is about to basically monitor the integrity of the electoral processes in the Eastern Partnership countries, provide narratives that basically combat malign narratives or foreign interference in electoral processes, and is also about raising awareness and media literacy or voter education, because our democracies are fragile, and we are about to see in the coming 1.5 hours how that developed or undeveloped in the Republic of Moldova. A few house rules. We have the speakers. They will be given 10 to 12 minutes to present their findings about the elections. They will focus on specific aspects of the election observation mission or the work that they do as civil society experts and observation experts. But we'll start with Alina Doroftei, as I said, ReThink.CEE Fellow, who actually has wrote for Pro-Elect the pre-electoral assessment of Moldova, and she will introduce us into the findings of her paper. Alina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sergiu, and thank you, GMF, for the opportunity also to work on the risk assessment earlier this year in June, July, and now with a new policy brief, which is focusing on Russian hybrid campaign and interference in the parliamentary elections. Based on the risk assessment, in fact, we decided that it was the most major aspect of the elections, and that's why it was chosen as the topic on which to focus more. Basically, just to look at the parliamentary elections, we have to look a little bit broader. So both temporarily, we have to look at the entire electoral cycle, which started in 2024 with the parliamentary election and referendum, because it was clear from then that Russia's objective is to derail Moldova's path on EU course, similar to how it was done in Georgia. So, the presidential election and the referendum in 2024, in fact, what happened, it showed more or less the instruments that Russia was going to use, proxies, oligarchs, So I think it was quite a good awareness for 2025 parliamentary elections, both for Moldovan institutions, for civil society actors, for mass media, for NGOs, and also for international partners. So people knew kind of what to expect. Of course, it was expected to be at a much bigger scale, and it clearly it was. But basically, knowing it, exposing it, it's already a first step. It prepares a little bit for how to respond. Looking at the Russian interference and how it evolved in 2025, as I was saying, the playbook was more or less the same, with some differences. And I think the work of independent media investigation and NGOs and think tankers in Moldova was very effective to show in detail how it worked. We have the classical, because Russia is not working in Moldova for the first time on influencing political activities, but we see how political technologies with fake opinion polls or with paid opinion polls, with political activities in the field, then the bigger information war on how fear and anxiety is manipulated, especially in the context of the Russian aggression in Ukraine. The use of political proxies, of church figures, of oligarchs, and also cybersecurity campaigns, bomb incidents. So the entire playbook, kind of what we had in 2024, we had it again in 2025, but a little bit different. So on one side, there was a stronger central coordination from Moscow, and I think the investigation showed it also a little on how shore activities and the oligarchic network activities were linked now to Moscow political objectives. It was better resourced. We hear about $300 million, or also the president, Maia Sandu, mentioned several times that we are talking about several hundred million euros resources which were poured in this campaign. Also more flexible on how, for example, the infrastructure which was built by oligarch Ilan Shor in over 10 years of political life, starting with the social shops, but his network of political activists. It was redirected also towards online communication, and how it was linked also with activities through Evrazia Foundation. So we see how all this infrastructure has been repurposed. And then also the use of third countries' proxies. Even if maybe sometimes it's difficult to link it directly to Moscow, we see clear alignment in tactics and in objectives. And also, just to mention here that how diaspora was targeted, also on the mobilization, on how political actors from Romania, and I'm talking of course of our party, but also other political actors got involved into into parliamentary elections in Moldova. And also, this was new, at least for me, on election observation activities in diaspora. We saw fake observers, it's not over yet. So there was clearly a plan B, and we are seeing now the plan B unfolding. It's chaotic, so it's a little bit unclear, but there was a plan and there is a plan to kind of continue present Moldova as a country which is not democratic, and to delegitimize the election results. And to prepare the ground for not recognizing the elections, and even there was an attempt to have maybe civil disobedience or public disorder. And that's why I think it's very important that we continue to monitor closely what's happening post-elections in Moldova. I mean, we are still waiting, in fact, for the Constitutional Court to validate the results of the election. And we have to see how the Russian interference will, and the hybrid campaign will continue also in the post-electoral period. And they still have instruments at the disposal, from energy to force flag or security incidents in Transnistria. Then what were maybe the weaknesses of the Russian interference? As I was saying, there was not an element of surprise anymore. I mean, we can compare to maybe other elections like in Romania or so I think for Moldova, because of this awareness, institutional and public level, so the element of surprise was missing. Then it was based on corruption. Basically, it was on money, but money through corrupt networks, which meant also that there was the money was siphoned off from at least what several sources are indicating. And it was based on controversial figures. I mean, Ilan Shor has the highest NT rating in Moldova. And also the political technologists, which put several political parties with controversial figures together in electoral blocks, it was quite clear that it's not going to work very well. This take the money-based approach mainly lacked clearly a broad appeal. So there was nothing in the back which positive that could engage positively people. And in general, Russian attractiveness, it's very low now for, of course, for youth, for education, for traveling, for migrants work. So people were basically, they had to choose between European course or best case scenario, gray zone. So I think that this was also a very significant factor in why Russian interference and reliance mainly on nostalgia, greed, and fear did not work properly. I mean, but of course, it works at a certain level, and this will continue. So medium term, and in terms of erosion of trust in governance and in democratic processes, this is a very, very serious issue, and this has to be one of the main things that we need to work on more. I mean, we as a civil society and think tanker. In terms of resilience, from the Moldovan side, at institutional level, I think from the strategic level, I was mentioning this awareness. I think that President Maia Sandu herself, but also Prime Minister and others, made sure to create this awareness internationally and at home about Russian interference. And the Supreme Security Council meeting in July exposed very well like the 10 tools of Russian hybrid interference. So there was a lot of work done from the highest strategic level, also presenting information done or work done by the intelligence services just to expose. So main thing is expose first Russian interference. Then there were clearer competencies. There were some changes to the legislation, a little bit clearer competencies between National Anti-Corruption Council and police, much better interagency work, and working together, especially law enforcement, and very good mobilization of resources. I mean, we saw publicly a lot of big law enforcement operation being carried out. As I was mentioning, some legal and regulatory measures were strengthened, a little bit rushed in the last minute, which created some weaknesses, but overall it helped with extremist activities, with camouflage blocks, with successor parties, and also with discouraging people by increasing sanctions for passive and active corruption. And capabilities were reinforced by partnering with NGOs and also working with international partners. Both Audiovisual Council and the CEC worked had a very good monitoring and oversight of also financing of online campaigning in partnership with NGOs and other partners. At society level, I mentioned the undercover investigation, but there was a lot of other activities of many NGOs, but also of a good mobilization of the entire society, of influencers and of people. And internationally, we saw EU really stepping in, and I think colleagues from Chișinău can tell more. But stepping in to support due to dismantling of USAID activities in Moldova, and especially to support to mass media, NGOs, cybersecurity, and EU in general kind of was quite a lot involved also on hybrid, on disinformation, on communication, on crisis management, and many member states stepped in quite quickly to fill in the gap from US funding. Very good high-level political support, which was good also because it gave people a very clear signal that EU integration is realistic. It's a real option. It's not just on paper. So it's something. And of course, I'm biased, but I have to mention also Romania a little bit. And I don't mean only politically and institutionally, but also from the civil society. We had a few organizations like Expert Group Context or Funky Citizens do a lot of monitoring of online activities, but also of Funky Citizens did election observation activities. So I think this also helped a lot with creating awareness also in Romania and generally about, especially about the activities which were targeting diaspora. And we saw a few also operations by police and the National Audiovisual Council to try to dismantle this a little bit. I mean, I think we saw only the top of the iceberg. So in terms of, I think I'm a little bit late, but I will just go quickly through the recommendations. A response to Russian hybrid war needs to be robust, proportional, legitimate, but unfirmly anchored in the rule of law. I think these are the main principles that any country has to take into consideration when responding to a hybrid campaign. Now, concretely, kind of now, when we look at the institutional level, I think there is a need now to move from ad hoc working method to more permanent, to more way of working interagency, which means also stronger strategic and operational coordination capabilities. The competencies that have been changed recently in terms of national or the creation of the National Crisis Management Center, we have to understand clearly how the all these institutions work together to on the entire cycle of policy making, from awareness, from risk or threat assessments to informing policy decision and then policy implementation. So it has to be more streamlined and a way of working of all of these activities and more permanent, not only ad hoc. Then other institutions which were created recently, like the Cybersecurity Agency and the Critical Infrastructure Center under the Ministry of Internal Affairs, they have to be fully staffed and fully operational. Of course, for this, international support is key because it's a very big job ahead. And then not least, but justice reform and anti-corruption remains key. These are the areas where it's the lowest trust we saw in the opinion polls at people's level. So trust in justice has to be restored through reform, but also through high-profile cases. And so people need to see that impunity is ending, that people are punished, and also confiscation of assets. And so they are paying for... in terms of society, at society level, the civic space, which was is still under pressure from intimidation, harassment, financial aspects. We saw a slap type of lawsuit against NGOs. So for this, there is a need to improve the infrastructure, or to invest more resources from donors, which is more core funding, multi-annual, and also to create this support infrastructure or platforms for the organization when they are under cyber attack, when they are under legal attack. So there is a need to create a better infrastructure to support NGOs and mass media. Then polarization, it's not only polarization, political or geopolitical polarization, but also the a big segment of the population which is feels unrepresented, and it's kind of unconvinced, it's undecided. Only 2-3 weeks before the poll, 43% of the people were undecided about with whom they are going to vote before elections. It's a huge number. So this shows how much work has to be done by the political parties themselves to rebuild trust. It's not easy in the world in which we are all living now. We see in other countries a similar kind of but it has to be done, and it has to be done from grassroots level and bottom to top, with investments which maybe don't show immediate short-term results, but they have to be there. It's media literacy, it's critical thinking, it's in education, it's working with children. So all of these areas have to really continue and to be... And from international actors, of course, the biggest expectation remained from the EU politically on starting the opening the chapters for negotiation. Then also kind of showing clear benchmarking on how the EU integration course is going to advance for Moldova and for Ukraine. Financial support also, this stepping in, filling in the gaps was quite good and welcome, but it has to be transformed into longer-term programs. And also maybe because we know that EU institutions are not always very flexible in terms of funding, but it needs to bring in more EU member states, so more flexible, maybe other partner countries, and advocacy in Washington has to continue to restore financial support for certain critical areas. And not last, because these are only some immediate thoughts after the election, I think it will be important to have like a proper lesson learned exercise in Moldova done at the institutional level and with NGOs, with mass media, to understand, to see much better on how this worked in practice and where the pitfalls were, or the problems or the issues. And also how this can then influence and create, or maybe define ways in which we work together at European level, so cross-border or trans-European, we can call it a resilience mechanism. And I think there are two main issues that have to be targeted, which have no border. It's money and online. So it's illegal, it's money laundering or illegal financial circuits, and fighting online disinformation. For actors who have no borders, we have to find ways in which we operate more or less not in similar ways. I mean, better coordinated and with better, I would say, way of engaging without considering borders. And this was mainly the main. These are the main recommendation. I can, if there are questions, I can continue in the Q&A, maybe, or to respond to specific.
Thank you very much, Alina. I am mostly certain that there will be questions. Thank you for this presentation with, chirurgical precision of how the environment in Moldova was before the elections and what are the lessons learned or the recommendations for future electoral cycles. But maybe just out of curiosity, because I forgot to mention, we actually witnessed a small miracle with the outcome of the elections. And of course, now it's easy to go back and analyze and say what has worked and what has not. But just before the elections, what was your forecast for the outcome?
Well, I think for me it was always about diaspora. It was because it was diaspora mobilization which had the power to tip the balance. I had access to some sociological research which was done, not all of it public, and I think only 2-3 weeks before the opinion of case, they were showing this huge number of undecided. But then also when you are looking at people who consider that the direction of the country is better, people who are supporting European course on all of this, and also when certain disinformation narratives were being tested about should diaspora vote or not. On many of these, the trends were good. They were showing that people are more resilient to disinformation, that people, at least geopolitically, they support EU integration. And they consider also in terms of, I saw in an opinion poll, even on their financial situation, there were a little bit people who are believing that their economic situation is a little bit better. Of course, so based on this, I would say that I was optimistic, realistic,
moderately optimistic. Okay.
But on the balance, and because it was really, I think nobody could tell surely what will happen with the undecided, how this will play.
I'll ask this question to Polina because she's working with Mr. Boțan and they were commenting the polls just before the elections. But before that, we'll go actually to Ion Manole, an astute connoisseur of the elections in Moldova, actually running or observing all the elections in Moldova for about the past 20 years or even more. Not to say that Ion is old, he's the youngest he can be, actually. Ion, maybe your perspective on the elections, on the electoral code, the irregularities that you have observed, and probably some of your inputs into how this played out. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergiu. Thank you for organization of these discussions. Very important for Moldova, first of all. And let me start with the information that this mission for Promo-LEX was the third, 30, so 30. And we, for last 15 years, cover practically all national elections in Moldova. For this time, we deployed over 930 observers nationwide and abroad. And we can say that after we monitor elections, we come to the national and international public opinion with our findings, with our conclusions, and of course, recommendations. And after that, we try to make advocacy. And let me say that, for example, the new electoral code was adopted with 20 out of 22 our recommendations. So I think this is a good result and prove that all our activity and including recommendations are important for electoral environment in Moldova. Thanks to my colleagues, I will separate a few information through different sectors, and I will start with political and social context. In pre-election period was characterized by political stability with, everybody knows, with a single party government in office, and Moldova's EU candidate status and allegations of Russian interference continued to polarize the environment in Moldova. Also, if we speak about interferences, Promo-LEX documented that all these interference took organized forms, like illegal financing of parties, cyber attacks, paid protests inside the country, manipulation via religious actors, and disinformation campaigns. All of them was and probably still here in Moldova. The second aspect which I would like to refer here is legal framework. And I mentioned that in 2021, we adopted new electoral code, which is in the force from 2023. So this new electoral code provides adequate conditions for organizing elections, mostly in line with international standards, and was for the first time applied in the context of parliamentary elections. Positive amendments included the extension of postal voting in Moldova for the second time, because first time was tested in previous elections, presidential elections 2024. But the most challenging and important thing was probably combating of illegal financing and electoral corruption. In the same time, legal stability was undermined by frequent and late amendments after the date of election was set. New accreditation rules, for example, which affected or can affect activity of observers. So new accreditation rules for observers required proof of organizational capacity, exceeding domestic law and international practice, creating a risk of arbitrary rejection. Next element is election administration. CEC, I mean Central Election Commission in Moldova, generally manage the electoral process in an efficient and transparent manner by organizing public sitting, live streaming decisions, and implementing civic information campaigns. The number of accredited observers, both national and international, was significantly higher than in 2021 and 2024. Nevertheless, sensitive CEC decisions were often adopted by a ratio of 3 to 6 members. Some regulations were not finalized by the start of campaign, and staffing gaps persisted. Promo-LEX documented pressure on CEC members at the age of intimidation, just for your information. About candidate registration. The activity of CEC was transparent. All applications were examined in a public sitting within legal deadlines. However, stricter requirements under the law of political parties limited the participation in the electoral processes, in some of them, at least. Also, the CEC modified some lists registered candidates only days before the elections, despite the electoral code forbidding such changes within 10 days. These late exclusions, for example, of in the Patriotic Bloc and Democracy of Home party lists. Although appreciated by Promo-LEX elections observation mission for giving these candidates the opportunity to correct the identified problems, highlighted the inconsequences of the legal framework. So, as you can see, nothing is perfect, or nothing is perfect in our electoral aspects. but situation is not very bad. And let's see a few information regarding election campaign. In this campaign was highly polarized over the country's geopolitical orientation, and it was also more intense than in 2021 and 2024 elections, combining online and offline tools with face-to-face outreach activities. Promo-LEX election observation mission documented widespread irregularities, many of which are systemic and requirement. Abusive use of administrative resources. This is a phenomena which described as constant and large-scale problem for Moldovan elections. On all practical levels, from the central level to the local level, administrative resources are used by those who have this possibility. And this is, as I mentioned, a national problem and national phenomena, which we try to stop. Next is electoral corruption and illicit financing, manifested in an organized form with external support. Next is unregulated activity of third parties, especially online actors, involvement of religious cults in campaigning activities, negative campaigning and smear tactics, focus on geopolitics in the expense of substantive policy debate, absence of key leaders from debates, limiting public discussions on electoral problems. Campaign finances. The parliamentary elections were held within a framework with strict rules on reporting and control of political financing. The CEC demonstrated a strong commitment to the integrity of the electoral process and identified irregularities, including late reporting, incomplete donation records, and non-compliant bank use. About complaints and disputes, for this time, at least from my observations, we identified many complaints, and much more than in previous campaigns. And from this point of view, I think we are on the right way, because many times on public and TV debates and TV shows, we recommended to the political parties to use the legislation, to use the norms which oblige political actors, concurrents of electoral concurrents, to use the legislation to complain every time when they have and identify some violations of electoral rules by other political parties. So this time, Promo-LEX recorded over 80 complaints and notifications filed with the CEC, mostly on misuse of administrative resources and illegal campaigning. Many were redirected to the police without examination on the merits by the CEC, while the results of the police examination are to be followed. At least 13 electoral disputes reached court, and with most dismissed. Hate speech and incitement to discrimination. This phenomena is also very frequent in our reports. For example, between July and September 18, Promo-LEX identified over 300 cases of hate speech and incitement to discrimination used in the context of elections. About 75% were spread via applications and social media, reaching over 6 million views. In election day, voting was orderly, but systemic vulnerabilities persisted. Secrecy of the vote was compromised in some polling stations. Deficiencies in the voters' lists, presence of unauthorized persons and cases of illegal agitation on the in the election day, and some cases of members' refusal to provide copies to protocol top servers were reported by my colleagues as well. The reduction of 2/3 of polling stations for voters residing in Transnistria region probably many people, including abroad, pay attention on especially on the situation with Transnistrian region voters. And as you know, together with last-minute relocations, severely restricted access and led to long crises. We faced also problems for political actors, political concurrents, which don't have access on the left bank of the Nistru to make campaign, to speak with voters about their political agenda. And there are no possibilities to organize meetings or debates with the population from the left bank of the Nistru. And this is the serious problem regarding the conscient vote. So we have two-side problem. From one side, we have restrictions and some problems for accessing to the polling stations of the voters. And on the other side, we don't have access for the political parties to meet voters on the left bank and discuss about their political agenda. So election day was disrupted by bomb threats also that suspended voting in some polling stations in the country and abroad. Still counting and tabulation were assessed positively, with procedures largely respected and results transmitted transparency. And let me finish with preliminary conclusions. With my colleague also prepared for public opinion before final report. So elections were competitive and offered voters a choice. The election administration functioned with general transparency and election day was well organized overall. At the same time, elections were affected by systemic and recurrent problems, late legislative changes, restrictive registration rules, abusive use of administrative resources, electoral corruption and illicit financing. Also, Promo-LEX reiterates its call to Moldovan authorities to address these vulnerabilities, especially the abusive use of state resources, regulation of third parties, and effective sanctioning of corruption and hate speech, so that future elections can meet high democratic standards. With this, let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ion. This was very informative and very important. And probably the conclusion, were the elections free and fair?
Together with our colleagues from coalition, we think that this election was partially free and partially correct.
Okay, thank you. And with this, we are moving to Polina Panainte. She will probably expand more on why partially free and why partially fair. But together with that, also maybe Polina, you can also focus on what was the response of the civil society towards, foreign interference and how you have seen from ADEPT and from the coalition these elections. Thank you.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for inviting. As on the assessment of the coalition that the elections were partially free and partially fair, I have left in the chat the link to our statement. It's in English, it's a couple of pages, which summarizes the conclusions of all the organizations which are members of the coalition, including the Promo-LEX, which is conducting the main observation mission in Moldova. So I'll be happy to answer any question related to that in the Q&A section. But for now, I will proceed to answering or to develop on how the interinstitutional cooperation worked this year. So first of all, thank you for all who is participating in this discussion today and for all the support you have provided to Moldova for its democratic journey in the last years. These elections were a democracy test for Moldova, and the democracy, we know it's not tested when things go smoothly, but it's tested when ground shakes. And during these elections, Moldova was heavily trampled by disinformation, hybrid interference, voters bribing. That's how we discovered actually what resilience really looks like. Moldova today is very different from the Moldova 2 years ago. Being under constant pressure, crisis, constant stress, I think made us stronger, made our institutions stronger. And finally, we were able to safeguard our democracy. As said previously by Alina and by Ion, the elections unfolded in the conditions of a hybrid war, marked by massive foreign interference and sophisticated information manipulation. The risks were exceptionally high, while institutional vulnerabilities remained persistent. Trust in institutions was still low, and I have to admit that we have panicked. Every day we could hear about new bribing schemes, new people investigated for involvement in corruption schemes, announcements that more money are channeled by Kremlin to undermine elections. And at the same time, the electorate remained largely undecided, navigating a media space with low levels of media literacy. So if we look at this scene, most of the variables were indicating for a fragile democratic defense. Moldova seemed to be ill-equipped to counter sustained, well-funded attacks that operated without rules or restraint. However, despite this, Moldova's response was not passive. The country resembled a fortress under construction. Its defense wall was full of gaps, but steadily was reinforced with the support of institutions, of media, of civil society, and independent voices, each of us contributing to building this defense with the tools and resources we had at our disposal. We have to recognize that many of the tools we have applied were new or experimental. They were tested for the first time in real time under immense pressure. And what emerged was whatever, but not much coordination in the beginning. It looked like a creative chaos, a very dynamic, adaptive, and collective effort that in the end, against all odds, it began to organize itself. And we in the end had a pretty well coordinated process, being proud of how the institution cooperated and how the interinstitutional communication was secured. In the result, we had historic voter engagement. So the turnout in Moldova reached its highest level since 1996, surpassing even the recent presidential elections. Some other novelties that these elections brought was that pro-European forces achieved a decisive victory, securing at least twice as many votes than the parties aligned with Russian interest. And for the first time since 1994, the number of pro-Russian members of the parliament in Moldova, it's at a historic low. And this shows a profound transformation of the Moldovan society and of the political representation in the country. It's important to also mention that across the country, in 25 out of 32 rayons, people voted for a pro-European party, illustrating a broad and geographically diverse support for this reform-oriented and democratic agenda. But also something new was that Moldovans residing within the country voted in a similar pattern to those abroad, with a majority supporting the Party of Action and Solidarity, something which was not the case in the previous elections. Traditionally, people in Moldova voted slightly different from the Moldovans residing abroad. This year, the gap between the preferences has narrowed. So how Moldova proved to be resilient and why things worked this way? I think that Moldova had a clear understanding of the risks. Moldova had transparent communication and a unified effort by the state institutions, civil society, and the mass media. I will develop a bit on each of these factors. So first of all, as I mentioned, the risks were understood and acknowledged. We saw that authorities did not underestimate the magnitude of the challenges. the Security Council, the President, the Intelligence Service openly communicated both what are the risks and vulnerabilities of Moldova. They communicated this to the public. They acknowledged that, for example, stated to all of us, it was clear for all of us that the destabilizing schemes are coordinated from abroad, beyond Moldova's direct jurisdiction, and the authorities are vulnerable and cannot address all these things because not all of them are happening inside the country. As Alina mentioned in the beginning, many of these challenges are global, are inter-countries, like disinformation and money laundering. And Moldova is still learning how to be part of this broad process of communicating with other countries, and things do not move that fast in this sense. Also, the authorities clearly recognized that social media platforms are flooded with false narratives, with deep fakes, and national institutions are not ready to fully prevent such behaviors online. And the people were invited and supported to make the difference between what's false, what's real. So this honest communication helped build public awareness and reinforce trust in institutions, transparency, and vigilance. Secondly, the institutional response was focused on prevention and enforcement. We've seen institutions that acted swiftly and creatively to safeguard the electoral integrity. The General Police Inspectorate and the Central Electoral Commission prioritized in this period prevention and rapid sanctioning of violations. For example, the police led a creative public awareness campaign explaining what is electoral corruption and discouraged vote buying. We've seen thousands of individuals that were previously involved in illicit payments that were identified, sanctioned, and publicly reported. So this feeling in the society of impunity that the authorities, the law enforcement are not working and people can be corrupted, that nothing will happen to them, disappeared. People started to understand that engaging in such illicit behaviors is dangerous, and there are sanctions, and sanctions work. We've witnessed that the Central Electoral Commission strengthened the internal discipline of the political parties, enhancing this way transparency and fairness in the electoral competition. For example, we've seen the CEC that denied the registration of political parties that have internal issues, that have unresolved internal conflicts. We saw that the CEC monitored closely the party financing and issued sanctions for illicit or opaque funding, and recommended temporary activity restrictions for some political parties. And we also saw the justice at work. There was active legal oversight over the Central Electoral Commission activity. We've seen justice that offered some swift and decisive final rulings on violations on electoral integrity. And not less important, civil society and mass media played a crucial role in maintaining transparency and accountability. Both civil society as journalists, investigative journalists, actively exposed corruption schemes, educated citizens about electoral rights, and also demystified foreign interference tactics. We saw many coordinated campaigns organized by civil society, by the influencers. Everybody was encouraging voter participation and helped citizens critically assess the information. And maybe very important, it is to recognize the role of the civil society in bridging the institutions with the media and with the citizens, facilitating dialogue and mutual trust in the context when public trust in the institutions was and is still low. However, every stress test reveals weak spots. So not everything went well and smooth. Moldova encountered in this process both old problems in new forms and entirely new problems that we have never regulated before. What matters now is that we acknowledge them honestly and turn them into solutions before the next election cycle. So some of the challenges faced is the new electoral legislation that entered into force just 3 months before the elections. And Ioan mentioned about the sensitivity of this issue. Having this legislation enforced so late left very little time for institutions to adjust, to update regulations, instructions, and to train those responsible for enforcement. We've seen political parties that were not happy with this, and they said they did not have sufficient time to adjust to the new legal framework. So this brought some confusion, inconsistency, which at times undermined legal stability during the process. Also, some institutional decisions lacked transparency, and we developed this topic in the declaration, the statement I have attached in the chat. Some of these institutions refer to the reallocation of the polling stations for the voters residing in Transnistrian region just days before the election, the reduction of the ballots allocated for the voters in the Transnistrian region, again, which was a decision taken very fast, just a few days before the elections, or the cancellation of a party's registration based on confidential information, again, raised concerns, and in the context of low public trust, created more discussions. So for some, these actions fueled mistrust in institutions, but for others, they looked like signs of an active and militant democracy trying to protect itself. Beyond that, Moldova confronted entirely new unregulated challenges, especially around campaign financing and disinformation. We saw irregularities that affected results, but were not sanctionable because there are no regulations, no sanctions for such misbehaviors. Like the camouflaged political blocs, they are regulated and they are sanctioned only at the stage before the registration of the competitor. So they could only be penalized before the campaign, but not during the campaign, which happened with the Democrația Acasă, and which will have to see the Constitutional Court rule on this behavior of the political party, because the Central Electoral Commission could not sanction them. It was not regulated. Another challenge which we do not have an answer is the unregistered, unaffiliated third parties that were campaigning. And Ioan mentioned about that. It's very difficult to monitor the activity of the third parties who pour a lot of money in the electoral campaign, but which cannot be directly affiliated to one competitor. And massive untraceable social media operations. Again, Moldovan legislation is not ready to regulate that. We do not have an answer, and some unauthentic behavior in TikTok or in other online media is left to the discretion of this Constitutional Court to rule whether this was legal or not, and it affected or not the results of the elections. So we need to continuously modernize our legislation to reflect on the new realities in the digital era. So that's briefly. It was not perfect. It was far from perfect, but it was real. I think Moldovans were brave, and it was a process full of lessons we can all learn from. Maybe one main thing we learned is that resilience was achieved through dedication, unity, and a lot of teamwork, a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. All this helped us get through these elections, but only sustained transparency, civic education, and continuous democratization will get us through the next ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Polina. We all deserve a vacation. That's the other lesson learned probably from these elections. But no, I mean, coming back to the topic, yeah, to some extent, Moldova is a front runner or a champion of what integrity of the election processes means. Some things have been tested, experimented that probably don't exist in Romania or in other European countries. And we all have to learn from this whenever we are in the European Union or outside of it, but hopefully we'll be in the European Union too. We are a little bit behind the schedule, so I'll be moving to Laurențiu. Laurențiu, please try to keep to the time so that we can also offer the audience the possibility to address questions. Laurențiu, over to you.
Thank you. I will try to delve into the geopolitical part of this election, because I would say that when we look at the September parliamentary elections in Moldova, we cannot just see them as a domestic political contest. So because as you may know, Russia has used Moldova as a testing ground to basically diversify its hybrid threats towards other countries too. We've seen that in Romanian elections. We've seen that in other European elections, even in France or Germany. So, but I would say that few electoral contexts so clearly displayed the range of hybrid tactics Russia attempted in Moldova. And with these elections, the extent to which these threats failed, because we see a consecutive election cycle where basically Russia loses its grip from Moldova, and this was reflected at the 2021 parliamentary elections, then presidential elections and the EU referendum, and now the legislative election this year. But I think that the geopolitical implications of even the election integrity processes in Moldova are profound, because first of all, as you are well aware, Moldova is mentioned explicitly in the foreign affairs documents of Russian Federation. Moldova shares the longest border with Ukraine of 750 miles. This is the second longest border with Ukraine after Russia. So you can imagine that Moldova is really important for Russia, because it has assets in Moldova. So it has political parties and actors of influence, but also it has Russian troops, 1,500 of troops, but also ammunition depot in Moldova. So you can imagine that in the context of the war in Ukraine, Moldova is an important piece in the puzzle of Russian warfare. And of course, the tactics employed in the electoral cycles are used for other countries to influence the outcome of the elections in other countries, because like a piece of domino, Russia wants to have many partners in the region, in the European Union, and to destroy the European project, and also the values that the Western civilization is keen to protect. But of course, the novelty of this election when it comes to Russian interference, for me, it was the use of new political technologies, but also the use of the diversification of new technical tools. And here I would like to emphasize that for the first time, even they did not do that in the 2024 elections. For this election, Russia has used crypto in order to influence the outcome of the election, and not a regular crypto that we know, a crypto that is called A7, A5, that was developed by Ilan Shor's team and other influential persons in Russia. So you can imagine that this crypto was used to invest money in the electoral campaign in Moldova, but also to launder money throughout Europe, and to evade international sanctions that were directed to Russia from the international community. And this tool was even presented in a conference of Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, where Ilan Shor, the agent of influence that is from Moldova but is residing abroad, even presented this invention, this new technology to basically help Russian influence in the region. This is important because this was used in Moldova. We've seen a diversification of financial channels through new apps used in Moldova, the Taito app that was used to mobilize Shor-affiliated activists. We've seen that tens of thousands of people installed the app based on the authorities' information. And this app was really important because funds were sent from Russia in rubles through Promo-LEX bank. Then they were converted to crypto, A7, A5. Then they changed it in a foreign currency, and finally into Moldovan leis cash. So you can imagine the diversification and the upgraded tool of Russia in this election that was really a new toolbox of hybrid interference. And it's important also because we've seen how Russia has adapted also through its based NGOs, so-called NGOs like Evrazia, that has organized covert operations from Moscow, which transferred funds to Moldova to basically finance propaganda. Alina has mentioned fake opinion polls, but also they did that to organize training trips for Moldovan priests, but also teachers. We've seen many new tactics for this year's election, but when we look at the outcome of the election, we see that this did not work as effectively as in 2025, and I think that my colleagues explained very well the mobilization of institutions, civil society, mass media, and so on. They were crucial for safeguarding the election integrity process. And of course, I would like to mention the fact that this is not only a Moldova win, this is a win for Europe too, because I think that the European states should capitalize on this momentum and to be more decisive to support countries that prove to be resilient and that can be an example of citizens' resilience in the region. You can imagine what would have happened if in Moldova the pro-Russian actors would won this election. This will be a catastrophe for regional security, because we've seen that Russia has great plans with Moldova. It can use Moldova, as in Georgia, to evade international sanctions, but also it can destroy the enlargement policy of the European Union to portray that this policy is not effective, is not working. It needs to find another solution for EU expansion. But I would say that basically this is the moment of Moldova to receive funding, pre-accession funding to implement the reform. We've seen some progress in the country, even in the most pro-Russian regions in Moldova. From the north of the country, we've seen that people chose Europe, and this means that Moldovan authorities should work more in the region far from the capital, because there they can have a good dialogue with the people that understood very well the stakes of this election. I think that in general, the Moldovan people understood very well the stakes of this election better than any expert, because nobody expected such a big win for the pro-European parties, even though Russia has invested a lot in creating alternatives, pseudo-European parties that could sway the pro-European vote. We've seen that if we count the pro-European projects for these elections, there are even more than 50% of the votes. And this means that Moldovans put a debate on the foreign affairs and the vector of Moldova. So it's not a question if Moldova wants to join EU or wants to look towards Russia. Now we see that there is a majority of people that vote in consequence of consecutive elections and choose the European path. And ultimately, I would also want to add that this win, this triumph, is not only it's not only important for European Union or for Moldova. It's also important for the countries in the region that looks towards Moldova. We've seen, for instance, protests in Georgia these days on calling the elections not legitimate, but there you can see also the Moldovan flag. So basically now Moldova is an example of citizen resilience and the pursuit of the European values that can be a good example for other countries in the region, for Georgia, for Armenia and others. So with Moldova, I think that also the enlargement policy could have a greater success, and I think that also the international community and donors, because they also have helped a lot in this period of crisis, they need to look towards Moldova and to continue to do that, because even though the elections are over, we've seen a pro-European win. We do not need to forget about Moldova, because now is the time to support the reforms for the Moldovan people, and also for Moldovan people to feel the actual benefits of the European Union. And this could happen very soon with the opening of the negotiation chapters for Chișinău. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurențiu. Very interesting. And yes, indeed, Moldova is maybe ironically becoming the beacon of democracy, inspiring Georgian protests and probably inspiring other countries in the region, probably because we have showed that, well, Russia can be defeated. And that's a win, and we should savor it. But since our audience is a little bit shy, I have a few questions that I want to ask, and probably you all can address them. Since we are talking about Russia, what's next? What do you think Russia will be doing? Because my personal opinion is that they won't stop. I mean, yes, they have been defeated, but the war is not over. So what do you think will be the next actions of of Russia in Moldova and in the region. And probably also going back to societal resilience. And you have mentioned, all of you have mentioned the role of influencers, of mass media, of civil society. So how do you see this unfolding? Do we still need to continue with these activities, or we are okay because the Moldovans voted the right way? And coming back to the more than 40% undecided voters, what do you think that worked, or what convinced them to vote for the pro-European forces? And I'll stop here, but I still have questions. Maybe we can start with Alina in the order of the presentations. Thank you.
I think I was touching a little bit on that the Russian hybrid war is clearly, didn't start in September and it's not over now. So it's a long-term engagement. It fits into the broader region objectives that Russia has in the neighborhood, and also at European, it's related to European, and even like how to reshape transatlantic order. So and based on this more strategic and geopolitical objectives, it's clear that it's not over, and we will still have a few, maybe one more week to see how this contesting of legitimization of election will unfold after the Constitutional Court validation of results. But for me, this is one clear direction in which it will continue, like portraying the country sliding into dictatorship, into an authoritarian regime, of course, using the majorities that PAS has in the parliament and the popularity of Maia Sandu. So this will be this will continue to be one major direction in which a lot of the information campaign coming, and also support to political actors now in parliament. Then the polarization, even if we have seen a little bit maybe shrinking polarization or like geopolitical, but it's still there. It's still there in terms of regions, Gagauzia, Taraklia, or so. So this hasn't changed profoundly. People saw the threat coming and reacted, but then longer term, it's still there. That energy insecurity, Transnistria, all of this, they can use it short term, and they can still escalate things and make it. This winter will be a big challenge for the government to go through the heating season. Because there is a lot of economic vulnerability in the country, and these are easy to continue to be exploited. So I think these are more or less they still have the instruments available, and there is no reason why they would stop now. They will not just give up.
Thank you, Alina. Ioan, and in addition to the questions I've already addressed, maybe you can speculate a little bit on the Constitutional Court's ruling, if they will probably adopt what the CEC has submitted, or the Kostiuk's party, maybe, I don't know, prohibited from entering the parliament.
Let me start with the previous question regarding what can happen, what we can expect in Moldova for next period. I think that Russia will not give up. Russia will accommodate and update their methods, because in Moldova there are too many actors and groups who still support Russian politics, including this criminal war in Ukraine, in our neighbors. So, and Moldova is a real and a very serious and vulnerable country, still vulnerable country. Even we have this kind of victory now. I think this is just a small victory in a big battle. So we need to to learn from all these lessons, to be there, to work every day, and to save our democracy, because this is very important, not only for Moldova, but especially for Ukraine, and also for our entire region, Black Sea region. Why Moldova is very vulnerable? On our very small territory, we have 3 armies: National Constitutional Army, separatist illegal army or paramilitary structures, and Russian army. So this is very big vulnerability for our security, of course. And the last elections was, first of all, issue of security, and only after that about election of our representatives in the parliament. So probably because of this, people voted massively with only one party, to be sure that Moldova will continue on this democratic and prosper way, pro-European way. What we can do for next period is very important, in my opinion, to work with people. We failed, after 3 decades of our independence, we failed to integrate minorities, especially Russian speaking minorities, Gagauzin people from Gagauzin autonomy, but also from other regions. And in this context, it will be very difficult and very complicated to speak about reintegration of the country if we failed to integrate our people from autonomy. Of course, it will be more complicated and more problematic to speak about reintegration. So I think the most important element in this context is our people. We need to speak, to change our messages to our people, our citizens from all our country. We need to work more and more seriously with them. We need to include and involve them in all discussions, debates, and political activities in our country. Only in this case, if we will put accent on the people and not on the territory, I think we can change the situation on the ground. And regarding Constitutional Court and the case, Kostuk case, I don't think that Constitutional Court will take these 6 mandates from Kostuk party. I think it's too dangerous and too dangerous situation. I hope Constitutional Court will adopt the decision with and will allow this party to go in the parliament.
Okay, thank you, Ion. Polina, in addition to the previous questions, for you specifically, what would be your recommendations to PAS party? Because obviously they will be forming the new government. They have a mandate from the people. What would you suggest them to do better than they did in their previous government? Thank you.
Thanks, Sergiu, for the question, complicated question, but I wish I could dictate to PAS some of the things to be done. I think they have recognized that they failed at constructive dialogue with the people. So they were too busy with ruling the country that they forget to engage sufficiently with the citizens, and people recognize that they feel disconnected with the processes. So I think this is one very important thing to be done to improve communication and build trust in the institutions. People need to believe that European integration is for something, and that they start living by the rules of the democracy in the European Union. We expect that from them, and I hope they are aware of that. They had a platform which they presented in the campaign. They should start delivering on this. It was a platform which was promising, vowing to us in European integration by 2028. So that's 3 years from now. It's a very ambitious agenda. But with this solid support from the citizens, there is clear expectation that this should happen. I think it is very important not to see the situation of these elections as a final battle, and that democracy is sufficient, solid to go further. These elections passed, like the integrity was not undermined to that extent, just because a lot of effort has been put in. Very many people, very much pressure, a lot of resources. Everybody was tensed and panicked. So, but this cannot last forever. So we need to invest in sustainable democratic development, in civic education, in media literacy, and safeguarding the civic space. We can hear already that Moldova is joining EU in a couple of years, no more support for civil society, because that's a sign that Moldova is ready to stand still as a democratic country. But that's not so, because Moldova is going through European Union, to the European Union with a very fast, speedy wave. And we as society do not really internalize the democratic values. We still don't live by the democratic rules. Like we were not born in a democracy, so we still need time to accommodate with this new way of life, of recognizing the democratic rules and democratic values. So I think Moldova needs more support to sustain this democratic growth. It is possible. And now that Moldova is being pointed or showed as a case study, as a model in the Eastern Europe, that democracy can work in these countries, gives us more hope, and but also it's more pressure to deliver on what we have started building.
Thank you, Polina. A very nice plea for civil society support. We subscribe to this. Laurențiu, and maybe you could take also the questions from the chat in addition to my previous questions. And one is related to how to prevent further trainings of violent protesters like it happened in Serbia. So what but what probably the authorities can do to prevent that. And the question that might be also addressed by you is whether there was more disinformation in Romanian or in Russian language. And was it enough for what the civil society did, and also the authorities, in terms of democracy education, media literacy campaigns, and every type of awareness raising campaigns? Thank you.
Yep. I would like to start with the previous question on what Russia plans to do next. I think it will not stop. And I know that in Moldova, everybody is already tired of elections, but I will remind you that in 2027, there will be local elections. And compared to the 2023 local elections, we've seen that pro-European parties did not have a great result. And this means that on the local level, pro-Russian actors are really good at doing peer-to-peer meetings and talking to grassroots regions. So I think that this could be the next test for Moldova, even in this legislative period. And also, I think that Russia has already prepared some plans for the outcome of this election. It already tried to delegitimize this election, to present them as fraudulent, to present them as there were many bad things that the government was doing in order to win so many seats. So I think that in a nutshell, Russia could improve its tactics, and even for next election, Russia can bribe, can go with better candidates, because we've seen that in this election a criticism on pro-Russian parties was the fact that they have made a coalition with politicians from the past, politicians that were ruling the country already in the Communist Party period. So I think that if they could choose better candidates and better narratives, they could be more effective. So this could be a problem for the European future of Moldova. Returning to other question, I think that when it comes to trainings of violent protesters that took place in Serbia, in Kosovo, even in Bosnia, so Western Balkan countries. This is really hard to document this kind of intervention. I saw many investigations from mass media, but also reports from the authorities. So I think that the authorities managed to stop these networks for now. But this is a work for the security service of Moldova to monitor the situation and in order not to have violent protests in the future. Even in the day of the election, police has arrested 3 people from Transnistria region that planned to organize such violent protests. And of course, I think that this information doesn't have a language. So it happened both in Romanian, in Russian, and in English, because they even made mirror websites portraying famous international newspaper that presented fake information, deep fake AI, and so on. So, but of course, I think that in the future, Moldovan institutions should pay big attention to the regions with minorities. As Ion Manole mentioned, in Gagauzia, there we have seen the same result as in the 2024 election. So I think that the Ilan Shor network has worked the same as in 24. We've seen that in many elections, in local elections, in election for the Bashkan, the local governor of Gagauzia, the fact that Gagauzia is favoring pro-Russian actors, and this is to blame the pro-European parties that didn't advocate for European integration and European values in that region. So programs for teaching Romanian language should be expanded. So they were authorities have started this, but there is a need for more investment in this area. And also we've seen people from Transnistria that voted more than 30% for this election. For the referendum was the same situation. This means that there could be an openness from Moldovans in Transnistria, but this should be expanded and in the format of Chișinău-Tiraspol meetings that could basically improve the relations. And we've seen the statement of the president of Moldova, Maia Sandu, in the second day after the election about the gradual integration of the Republic of Moldova into the European Union, meaning that Transnistria could follow next. So I think that this is really important to also mention.
Right, Fro. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, because for some seconds you were frozen, Laurențiu. We actually exceeded our time, but we still have one question in the chat, so I would like to read it, and probably just your final remarks, 1 minute per each speaker, so that we conclude this very, very important and very interesting webinar. And the question reads, what are your thoughts on the threat of AI in elections? How could Moldova combat it. And let's start with you, Laurențiu, in reverse order. 1 minute.
Yep, I would say that for AI specifically, there is a international effort of identifying AI, and this means that every post should have an AI label. So this could be an efficient method to see what is the AI and what is real, because we've seen a deep fake campaign orchestrated by Russia for these elections. I will not mention what were the fake news involved, but you can imagine that they were effective for a part of population. And as to conclude here, I would mention that these elections are a lesson for the governing party, because the vote that was expressed by Moldovan citizens was mainly because Moldovans understood the stake of these elections. This means that they wanted a European integration as fast as possible. And second, they did not want Moldova to be in the sphere of influence of Russia, because this means an authoritarian model. This means less rights for citizens and so on. So they chose democracy and European values. So they did not choose just the party itself. And also a lesson for Europe, because Moldova, despite its size and economy, has shown that even under intense pressure, democratic institutions can hold. But for them to hold, there is a need for a investment, because Moldovan institutions remained on the position, of course, because of the international assistance and technical assistance that Moldova received throughout this period. And of course, this assistance needs to continue, because Moldova has to make important reforms now, the justice reform and the administrative reform. That these are the two reforms that comes to my mind that are the number one priority of the governing party, and they should be done with a support also by the economic growth plan of the European Union, but also through a whole of society approach.
Thank you, Laurențiu. Polina, your last thoughts. What are the takeaways?
Yeah, I think we should continue our efforts to consolidate the civic space, to support the independent media, and to invest in citizens. The threats and the challenges will change. We've seen in these elections how these schemes evolve, get more sophisticated, and I'm not sure we as a country with the institutions will be able all the time to run after all these developments. So it's utterly important that the citizens, the ones who are the recipient and the ones who interact with the schemes, are ready and are resilient to deter such interference, to recognize what's wrong, what's true, and be ready to safeguard democracy further.
Thank you, Polina. Ioan, what are your takeaways for these elections and for looking at the future?
Yes, I think this is not only the effort of Moldova. I think one country, for one government, for one society, is more complicated to fight with this phenomena. Everything is new, everything is very important, and new technologies. And I think we need to join our efforts together with our other democracies, our partners from EU and other parts of the world. We need to educate people, we need to inform people, but in the same time, as a lawyer, I am in favor of very strict rules and very concrete sanctions for violating of these strict rules. because democracy is not a chaos and should not be a chaos. So rules are very important, because if we speak about fake news, for example, we need to apply sanctions, especially for people who are elected in the parliament or in the public positions. They don't have a right to distribute or to distribute fake news. We should apply sanctions for this kind of actions. And the same situation with AE. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. Alina, last but not least, what are your takeaways as an outside observer, meaning you're not a Moldovan?
Yeah, I will just conclude saying that what it was in the policy brief as well. It needs to move from ad hoc to more systemic solutions. So it's sustainability. It's how, because now governance erosion will come. It's not only the Moldovan political actors and institutions that have to prepare for 4 years of governing, but these 4 years of governing will be a test, and there will be an example also for not only for Georgia or for Western Balkans, but looking also at how Romanians are viewing elections in Moldova. I think it's quite important that the authorities deliver on the promises, and then we didn't touch so much, but it will be also the economy. I mean, in order to fight populism, which is rising, and we see new populist political parties in parliament. So it will be a very complicated work in the parliament, I mean, with this kind of fragmented and populistic opposition, and with populism rising everywhere. The way to kind of combat it, it's through socioeconomic development, through addressing vulnerabilities, socioeconomic vulnerabilities and inequalities for people. So these are areas in which the authorities have to show much more progress than in the past. It's not easy, because if it was easy, other people would have done it also. But these are, for me, key areas in which kind of work has to be done in the next years.
Thank you, guys. It was very important and very informative, all your presentations. I hope the audience liked it and benefited from your expertise. The takeaways, again, very important. I hope there is someone that will pass it on to the government or to the ruling party as well. But from me, a round of applause, and we'll see you at the next events organized by GMF. Thank you a lot.